Hello, everyone, and welcome to a fresh episode of Ask the Pediatrician's Hour. Thank you so much for joining me today from whichever platform you're joining. For those of you listening on Fresh Waves Radio, I want to welcome you especially, as well as those of you who are listening on the podcast. Ask Dr. Baby ATP. Welcome to ATP Hour. And for those who are watching me on Facebook or YouTube, I also want to welcome you to Ask the Pediatrician's Hour. Thank you so much for joining us. This program is a platform where we share and discuss important health topics that are very essential to the well-being of our children. And today we're going to be talking about another very important topic. In fact, it's one of the most common issue that most children will have, and that is neonatal jaundice. So I want you to invite your friends. I want you to share the video or send the link to the podcast to somebody who you know should listen or should know about neonatal jaundice. Before that, I just want to remind you that this program has been brought to you by Ask the Pediatricians Foundation, which is a registered non-profit organization in Nigeria, and we're committed to the health and welfare of all children globally. But we started in Nigeria, and we do that through our health education and information programs and platforms such as our Facebook groups, where we have healthcare professionals and who can answer your questions as related to the health of your children or even your own health, as well as that for new moms. So we have about 4 Facebook groups where you can ask and get quick answers to health questions. We also do community medical outreaches to communities that are disadvantaged and that may not have easy access to healthcare professionals. And our next outreaches will be in May and June 2022. We are having our National Children's Day community medical outreaches, and we're going to reach about 40 such communities. We will very much appreciate if you can be part of our community medical outreaches. You can either volunteer, whether you're a doctor or not, it doesn't matter. There's something for everyone to do during our outreaches, or you can also support our outreaches financially. Our account details are on the screen, on our platforms, or if you're outside the country, you can actually go straight to our website, www.askthepediatriciansfoundation, or you can also give on our global giving page. We'll really appreciate your support as we reach out to the indigent children in Nigeria and Ghana. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to now go on and talk about the topic we have today. And then again, the topic we are going to be discussing today is neonatal jaundice, or you can also call it newborn jaundice. So you can see there are 2 keywords that are in that topic. One is neonatal or newborn, and the other one is jaundice. So newborn or neonatal, we used to refer to the period for the first 1 month of life. So all babies from day 0 to 28, we call them neonates, or we also call them newborns. So the first 1 month of life is the newborn period or the neonatal period. So when we're talking about jaundice or neonatal jaundice, we are talking about jaundice that occurs in the first 1 month of life or in the first 28 days of life, because adults can also have jaundice, and jaundice can occur in older children. But today I'm going to be talking about jaundice occurring in the first 28 days of life. Now, what is jaundice itself? So, jaundice is a word we use to describe yellow discoloration of the whites of the eyes, the skin, and what we call mucous membrane, that lines the inner part of our body. So when there's yellowish discoloration of those areas, usually most of us will see that on the eyes. So usually most of us have white eyeballs. So when that white part of our eyes are yellow, or the skin, we can see it also on the skin, then we refer to that as jaundice. So that is a meaning of jaundice. So when we talk about neonatal jaundice, we're talking about yellowish discoloration of the whites of the eyes and the skin in babies in the first 28 days of life. So that is neonatal jaundice. And why is it important for us to talk about jaundice? Why do we have to devote this time to talk about jaundice in the newborn? One is because jaundice is actually the most common condition in newborns. Okay, it is the most common of all medical conditions that newborn babies we have. It is jaundice. 60% of all babies we have jaundice. 60%. In other words, 6 out of 10 newborn babies are going to have jaundice. So you can see that that is a lot. More than half of all the babies are going to have jaundice. In fact, when you now move on to what we call the preterm babies, those are the babies that were born before 37 completed weeks of pregnancy. 80% of them are going to have jaundice. So jaundice is something that is so common in newborn babies. So it is very important for us as parents, caregivers, to know about jaundice. That is the first reason why we're going to talk about jaundice. Then the second reason why it's so important to talk about jaundice is that actually jaundice in babies can be an emergency. Okay, jaundice is one of those conditions that time is essence, is of strong, of great essence. So if you don't do the right thing at the right time, we can it can lead to very significant consequences, and that is why we need to know, and we need to talk about jaundice, because jaundice can affect the brain. In fact, that is our greatest fear when it comes to jaundice. If jaundice is not properly managed, it can cause what we known as brain damage. And when it leads to that brain damage, the child may have lifelong disability. In fact, some children can die from the same scenario if it is not properly managed. So jaundice is something that is that serious, okay? So it is not just one of those things. Of course, we have different kind of jaundice, which I'm going to talk to us about later. Well, I want us to understand that when pediatricians, when we see jaundice, we're looking at a potentially uh, a condition that can turn into an emergency, or a condition that can lead to lifelong disability or death. So it is so important for us to know about jaundice. It's very common, and if it is not properly managed, it can lead to lifelong consequences for the child. And so those are the important reasons why we need to know about jaundice, because on Ask the Pediatricians Foundation, we're committed to the health and welfare of our children, and we talk about things that are important to their health and to their well-being. And every parent needs to know about jaundice, because it's so important and it's so common. And unfortunately, people tend to treat it as something not so serious, but it can actually be very serious. Okay, now let's talk about jaundice itself. Why do baby have jaundice? What is the cause of jaundice in babies? Now, I've said that many babies will have jaundice because actually jaundice can be what we call normal or physiological. So it's a condition that can actually occur in babies who are not sick. It can occur normally, and we call that physiological jaundice. So that is one aspect of jaundice. But jaundice can also be caused by medical conditions or disease conditions as well. And jaundice that are due to disease conditions tends to go very high, and those are the type of jaundice that can lead to brain damage or death or very lifelong disability. And this is where the confusion comes in, because some babies will have jaundice and it will be what we call physiological or normal jaundice. It doesn't cause them any harm. It doesn't even require any treatment and the baby will be fine. Okay. But another baby may have jaundice that is due to medical reasons or conditions. And those kind of babies may have the jaundice go so high. And those are the kind of babies that can have brain damage or death as a result of jaundice. Now, for parents, when we see a child with jaundice, you are not sure whether that jaundice is going to be a normal kind of jaundice that doesn't require any treatment, or that is just going to go away, or whether it's going to be one of those severe kind of jaundice that is going to lead to brain damage, or that's going to lead to death. And this is where it is so dangerous to always go by advice of other people, because somebody's child may have had jaundice, which is a normal kind of jaundice, and they tell you, "Oh, go and give proper water or go and put them to the sunlight and it will go away." Now, for normal kind of jaundice, whether you give proper water or you don't give proper water, whether you put to light or you don't put to light, the jaundice itself is going to go away and it's not going to cause any harm to the baby, and that baby will be fine. But if a baby has very high level of jaundice due to a medical condition or disease, that jaundice is going to go very high and cause a damage. Of course, the jaundice is still going to clear anyway, whether you do anything or not. But by the time the jaundice is clearing, it would have left serious damage, to the brain of that child, if that's even if the child did not die. And so parents giving advice don't know that this child's jaundice is not the same as their own kind of jaundice that didn't cause their any harm. So they think it's because of what we did, that's why our own child got better. But actually, the jaundice got better because it is normal physiological jaundice and it's going to get better anyway, whether you do anything or not. So it is not what you do. In spite of what you did, that is the jaundice got better. But at the time when you are giving advice to another person, own child may have a different kind of jaundice that may cause severe damage, and then people listening to such advice are going to run into trouble. So that is why it is not appropriate to try and advise on how to manage jaundice as a parent or as a caregiver, because we need to first of all check that child, measure the level of jaundice before we can know. We can even do some other tests before we can know whether that child is having what we call physiological jaundice, or whether that child is having what we call pathological jaundice, or jaundice due to disease conditions, or whether it's a jaundice that is so high that we need to do some immediate treatment, or whether it's jaundice that is we don't really need to do anything. So at the beginning, it is not going to be easy for you to say this is this. So it is the job of the professionals to do that. And what that brings me to the point where I will say every jaundice must be taken to the hospital, must be managed by a professional. It's only a professional that is authorized after doing the necessary tests to tell you, okay, the jaundice that your baby has does not require any treatment. Just go home and breastfeed your baby. Or we are going to admit your baby, we are going to do A, B, or C kind of treatment. It is only the professionals that can give you such advice. So, because we live in a culture where parents take advice from everybody instead of seeking health professionals, and because people have experience and they always think, oh yes, because that person has had experience, has given me the advice, I can take it. Remember, the experience may look similar on the outside, but it may be completely different. So that is why it's important that if you think your baby has jaundice as a newborn baby, you need to bring the baby to the hospital. In fact, most of us in Nigeria, for example, we don't like discharging babies until we are sure that we've excluded jaundice, because we know that some mothers, they are always concerned about the naming ceremony and they are not going to come back because and that's another mistake parents do. Like, they want to do naming ceremony first. Every other condition will be managed after the naming ceremony. Jaundice is time sensitive kind of management. If you come at some certain time it is too late. Even if you do all the treatment in the world, it is not going to reverse that damage that has happened to the brain. So I really want us to understand the importance of jaundice and the time sensitivity related to it. So it's not something we can always fix. Sometimes it is too late to fix. So the best thing is to fix it when we can fix it. So I need to sound that warning right from the beginning because it's something you're going to hear me emphasize throughout the whole of the broadcast. So, but let's come back again to the beginning. So I've talked to us about the two kind of jaundice we have. There are different ways we classify jaundice, but I want to keep it simple for parents. So we have jaundice that you can call normal jaundice or physiological jaundice that do not require any treatment. It is just normal for it to happen. I can explain to us what is happening in that scenario. But you can also have jaundice due to medical conditions or diseases. And most of those ones are the ones that we are scared of and the one that we need to treat properly. Now, what makes a baby to have the normal kind of jaundice? Number one, when babies are born, they have so much red blood cells in their body, in their blood. They have too many red blood cells in the blood than they need. The reason why they have to have so much of it is that when they were in the womb, they are stealing from their mother. They are taking everything from mom. So they need to have a lot to be able to take so much from the mother. But now, when the baby is born, they are taking their oxygen from their own lungs and all that. They are taking their own, so they don't need so many red blood cells to be able to get enough oxygen because they have oxygen. So the excess red blood cell that babies have, so that's why when babies are born, they are looking so red. They have so much high level of red blood cells. So they are going to break them down because there's so much, they don't need so much of them. And then they need to break them down. So when those red blood cells are broken down, then the liver has to remove it, so the iron is separated. The end product of breaking down of that red blood cell is what we call bilirubin. You need to know that word, bilirubin. I don't like using medical jargons, but there are some key few of them that you need to know when we're talking about neonatal jaundice, and that one is what we call you need to know what we call bilirubin, because bilirubin is actually what is the end product of the breakdown of that excess red blood cells. And now when the bilirubin are broken down, when the red blood cells are broken down to form bilirubin, the liver is the organ that clears it off. So it clears it off from the blood, and it is passed through the gallbladder into the bile and into the stool. And that is actually what happens. That is the normal process. So for many babies, or 40% of babies, they are going to break down those red blood cells. They are going to clear it, and they do it efficiently, and the baby will not have any form of jaundice. But for some babies, the red blood cells, the process of clearing them, because the liver itself is not yet fully functional and all that. So it's the body may not be able to clear it as quickly as it's supposed to. And so the bilirubin is what gives that yellow color to the eyes. So the bilirubin, you can now see it in the skin and all that. That's why they look yellow. Once they're about what we call 5 milligram of them, then you begin to see it in the eyes and on the skin. Okay, so that is why we say the baby is having jaundice, because it's the bilirubin that is the pigment that is causing that yellow, and it's that bilirubin that needs to be removed. But in normal jaundice, within a few days, all those bilirubin will be cleared. And so they usually don't go beyond what we call 12 milligram. Usually they don't start on the first day of life. They usually start around 2 to 3 days when babies are 2 to 3 days old. And then they go high. Maybe they can go by 5 to 7 days, they've gone to the highest they can be. Usually they don't go beyond 12. And then after that, they come down and they're cleared. And the baby's fine. Baby is always well. In babies that have newborn jaundice or physiological jaundice, the babies are well, they're sucking, they're fine, but they just have that yellow tinge in their eyes. And when we check the blood level of that bilirubin, because when your doctor is telling you go and do jaundice test, what they're actually testing is the bilirubin. And we have these two type of bilirubin. We have the type before the liver has done anything on it, and we have the type after the liver has worked on it. So we talk about what we call unconjugated bilirubin and conjugated bilirubin. So it's the one that we worry about is the unconjugated bilirubin, because that is the one that can pass through the blood and go into the brain and can cause brain damage. So in babies, the normal kind of jaundice, it is it is because the excess red blood cells are being broken down and the liver is trying to clear it off, and it is lagging behind, but it will eventually clear it off. The jaundice will not be too high. It won't be more than 12, and it will clear within by day 10, day 12, everything has cleared. That is what we call normal or physiological jaundice. And so when we take your baby's blood sample and we look at the baby, based on when did the jaundice start, how high is the level of the jaundice, we can figure out that, oh, this is following the pattern of normal physiological jaundice, and we don't need to do anything. So we just let it be. But if there are other signs, then we know that, okay, this may not be. So how do we know the jaundice that are due to other issues, not the one I just described, due to disease condition? Number one, they tend to start maybe from day one. So any baby that has jaundice from day one of life, that baby does not have physiological jaundice. That jaundice, there is something causing it. So if you tell me, oh, immediately I gave birth to my baby, baby's already looking yellow, or even before the end of day one, baby's already looking yellow, that baby has a form of jaundice, not due to normal, what we call physiological process, but due to a disease condition. Two, those kind of jaundice tend to rise up gradually. They rise up rapidly. So in normal kind of jaundice, the physiological jaundice, the jaundice is usually rise up gradually. It doesn't even go beyond maybe one, in a day or so. But in jaundice that is due to a disease condition, the level of jaundice is rise up very rapidly. So you do it to maybe in the morning, maybe it's 5 or 7. By the time you are doing it in the evening, it's gone to like 12, more than 5 milligram in a day, that is definitely not physiological jaundice, because the rate of rise is very rapid, and obviously it's surely more than 12. Once you are doing jaundice and it's going to 13, it's going to 14, it doesn't even matter whichever day of life you are doing that jaundice level. Once it has gone beyond 12, it can never be physiological jaundice. We're talking about pathological jaundice. And some babies, even the first serum bilirubin test you are doing, it is 13, it is 14. We know that is not normal jaundice. Those are not the jaundice to go home with. Those are not the one you go and put under sunlight. Those are not the one you say go and give papa water or anything. No, those are jaundice due to disease condition. Those are the type of jaundice that can cause brain damage. Also, there are other things that doctors look out for, but I will not bother you with that, because the type of jaundice itself, the conjugated level, if it's above certain level, then we know that, oh, this is not likely going to be normal jaundice or physiological jaundice. This is definitely pathological jaundice. But the ones that at least parents you can figure out is if it's happening in the first day of life, if it is rising so rapidly, if the child is also sick, maybe the child is not sucking, the child is having fever, the child is having other illnesses, it is not physiological jaundice. Or it is going high at more than 5 milligram in 24 hours, it is not physiological jaundice. Those one, we call them pathologic jaundice. In other words, there's something going wrong. There's a disease condition that is causing this jaundice in this baby. And now, what are those disease conditions that cause jaundice, okay, in babies? There are so many of them, but I'll talk about the common ones, okay? At least there are 5 major common ones that we need to know about, but there are so many of them. The first one I will talk about is what we call ABO incompatibility, blood group incompatibility. If you're a mother and your blood group is O, and your husband is not O, so your husband is A, B, or whatever, there's a likelihood that you can have a baby that is A or B, then those your babies are already at risk of having jaundice because they have what we call ABO incompatibility. If we remember our biology, those who have blood group O, it means they don't have any antigens. But what it means that they have antibodies because the way our bodies are made, the body doesn't want you to bring something strange, a different kind of blood into your body. So there are agents that protect against that. So we call them antibodies. So if you are a O positive or O, let's just say O now, let's just start with O blood group, and a blood group from A person or blood group from B person try to mix with your own blood, those antibodies in you, they are going to quickly break it down so that that strange red blood cell will not enter your body. So that is how the body works. Now, what happens is that when a mother is O and a baby is A or B, what is or AB? It means that the antibodies that protect the mother is going to be fighting the red blood cells of the baby. And unfortunately, at some points during delivery, the blood of the mother and that of the baby, they're going to mix. At some point it will mix. And because of that, the antibodies in the mother, passed on to the baby, they are going to fight the baby's red blood cells. I'm trying to say it in simple terms as much as possible so you can flow with it. So what that means that those kind of babies, they will break down the red blood cells of those babies will be broken down rapidly until all the mother's antibodies that have mistakenly entered the baby's body have cleared out. So that is why babies like that are prone to having jaundice. And it's also one of the ones that tends to cause severe jaundice. And it is going to happen each time you have a baby that is not O. If you are O and your baby is O, both of you are the same, then there's not likely going to be jaundice from ABO incompatibility. But if you have married somebody who is not whole blood group and you have a baby that is A or B or AB, then your baby is at risk. Sometimes the baby managed to escape and we don't have jaundice, but majority of the time that those babies are going to have jaundice. And from all mothers, it's almost like every time they have their babies, as long as that baby is not old, that baby is at risk of jaundice. So that is number one of the common conditions that cause jaundice. This is when there's a blood group of the mother and that of the baby are mismatched. They are not the same. Mom is O and the baby is A or B. It's not the other way around. If you are A or B, or your baby is O, it doesn't work because you're not going to attack your baby anyway because that baby doesn't have any antigen. So it's the other way around. The mother has to be O and the babies have to be any of the other blood groups. That is number one. The other blood groups issue that can also cause jaundice in babies is what we call Restless Incompatibility. So the Restless is another form of blood group classification. So we call it you either Restless positive, you mean you have what we call the Restless D antigen, or you are Restless negative, you don't have the Restless antigen. So if you are negative, okay, and your baby is positive, you are likely the first time it happens when you're during delivery or miscarriage or abortion or whatever happens, that your baby's blood and yours mix together in you are going to develop what we call antibodies. You're going to be sensitized, so you're going to develop antibodies to fight what we call the Restless red blood cells. So next time it happens, you are having a baby who is Restless positive and you are Restless negative, you are going your antibodies that you've produced, they are going to attack the baby's red blood cells. So the baby is going to break down red blood cells much more than what we described for a babies with just the normal physiological jaundice. And that is why mothers who are Restless negative and having Restless positive babies, we normally have to give you an injection. We call it Rogam. It is a immunoglobulin, because what we're trying to do with that is to those antibodies you have developed because of the sensitization of having a rhesus positive baby. We need to clear it out. If we don't clear it out by giving you that Rogam, next time you are going to have another rhesus positive baby, you can destroy that baby even from the womb. You can your antibodies are going to attack the baby. The baby may not even be born. Baby may be born, maybe stillborn, or the baby will be born and baby will have severe jaundice, very severe jaundice. So this is another reason for uh, jaundice that is pathological, that is due to a disease condition. So we talk about ABO incompatibility, you talk about Restless Incompatibility. It doesn't mean that you need to go and change your blood group. You can't do anything about it. But once we know about that scenario, then when you have your babies, we are at a lot. Or if you have your babies in your hospital, then the doctor should be at a loss, knowing that this mother is O, a baby, we must check your baby's blood group so that we know that your baby, if your baby is not O and or your husband is A, or we are suspecting that your baby may not be whole, we are at a loss to look out for jaundice. The same thing, if you are rhesus negative, doctors are always at a loss that your baby, especially if your husband is rhesus positive, you can have rhesus positive babies. We have more rhesus positive people than rhesus negative people, which means that majority of people are rhesus positive. So the likelihood that you are rhesus negative and you will marry somebody who is rhesus negative is very slim. You are likely going to marry somebody with rhesus positive, which means that it's also likely that you're going to have a rhesus positive baby, which also means that your babies are at risk of jaundice. So if you're a rhesus negative mother, the doctors must know. We always check for it. We must know, and we must be prepared to handle a baby who is going to have jaundice. Another common condition that can also cause jaundice, pathological kind of jaundice, is what we call GCPD deficiency. It's also something that affects red blood cells. So there's a particular enzyme. I don't want to go into the medical jargon, but there's a particular enzyme that we all have in our body. And if you don't have that particular enzyme in the red blood cells, if the baby does not have it, the baby has what we call GCPD deficiency, and the baby is exposed to anything that can cause what we call oxidative stress, that can, any kind of condition where you need that enzyme to act. And because the enzyme is not there to act, then that baby will break down their red blood cells and then you can have jaundice. So that is why we say when babies are born, all these camphor, naphthalene balls, you don't expose them to babies. There are some sulfur drugs and things like that you don't give babies, because people that have GCP deficiency, they cannot handle those exposure, because when they're exposed to those things, it causes their red blood cells to break down, or what we tend to call hemolysis. Again, prematurity, when babies are born too early, before 37 weeks, those babies are called preterm babies. And preterm babies, 80% of them are going to have jaundice. Not for any other reason, but just because they were born too early. They are born preterm. So prematurity itself is also a cause of jaundice. So I've talked about ABO incompatibility, Restless incompatibility, GCPD deficiency, prematurity. Another common cause of jaundice is what we call infections. And these infections, there are different kind of infections. We have neonatal infections, even like sepsis, any infection for any reason, it can actually cause jaundice, but not malaria. Malaria is not causing jaundice. Also, we also have some what we call congenital infections, infections that the mother herself had when she was pregnant, but it doesn't affect the mother. The mother would just think, oh, maybe she has like flu or like malaria kind of symptom, but she's fine. But those infections, when they get to the baby in the womb, the fact that the mother is pregnant in the womb, those infections can cause serious harm to the baby. And one of the things they can also cause is jaundice. So we have what we call the touches infection, toxoplasmosis, cytomegalovirus. These are all like viral infections. Some of them are parasites like toxoplasmosis, rubella, and hepatitis and herpes, all those syphilis, all those kind of conditions if they affect the mother when she's pregnant, they can affect her baby and can cause jaundice. Also, we also have some conditions like what we call biliary atresia. When so this one is not about production, it's just I remember what I told you, that when the bilirubin is cleared by the liver, it is passed through into the gallbladder, and that is what form the bile that color our stools. If there's any problem at that junction, and they say, oh, the bile duct is not formed, or it's not properly formed, or there's an obstruction at that level, then the bilirubin that has been cleared by the liver cannot flow out. So it keep on circulating in the blood, and the baby can have jaundice. So these are the common causes of what we call pathological jaundice. So you can now see why it's so important for us to always take babies that have jaundice to the hospital, because it is not written on their face that this is just a physiological jaundice, or this is jaundice due to restless incompatibility, or due to ABO incompatibility and all that. We also, as pediatricians, we're not going to know that until we see you, until we take blood from the baby and take blood from the mother, because we need to know the blood group of the mother if we don't know it already. And then that is when we can have all this information. And these days we are looking forward to having this kind of machines is already available, where we don't need to take blood all the time. We can just, put the machine on the hand of the baby, and we can read out the level of jaundice. Because I know mothers always unhappy with us when we're always taking the blood, and we're always taking those blood all the time like vampires, and the mothers are always not happy. Yes, but we have what we call transcutaneous bilirubinometer now, so we can actually check the blood. We can actually just check the level of jaundice without taking draining the baby's blood. So we are working on that, and we're looking forward to it being available. It's available in advanced countries, but in Nigeria it's so expensive. But we're looking for it to have it cheaper, so that will be better. So because one of the reasons why some doctors or some parents don't go to the hospital for jaundice, because they don't want that blood taken, or people that can't be bothered to take blood, and they just use their mind, to figure out it doesn't look bad, maybe it's not. But you can never be sure of how high jaundice is just by looking. So that's why I worry a lot when parents tell me, oh, the doctor told me it's mild jaundice. And I always ask one question: was blood sample taken from this baby? They say no, they didn't take blood sample, they just think it's mild. If any doctor ever tell you that, that is not true. Before we can tell you the jaundice is mild, we need to confirm it, okay? Because even us as doctors, we can miss jaundice, because some babies, especially those babies that are very fair, sometimes you can miss jaundice in them. That's why you see the pediatricians, we take the baby out, we use natural lights, we don't rely on the in-night, and I was like, we want to use natural lights and look at the baby, and we blanch the skin, because most time jaundice is on the skin before it gets to the eyes. So by the time we're seeing jaundice in the eyes, it's actually high. So we always want to check it on the skin, and we need to take blood, okay? We need to take the blood sample. Don't worry, it is it's better we take blood sample and we pick up eye jaundice and treat it on time than for us not to do that, and the jaundice cause brain damage. I'm sure you don't want that. There are a lot of children today who have cerebral palsy, who have hearing loss, deafness, and all that because of severe jaundice. When jaundice is too high, we call it hyperbilirubinemia. When that bilirubin is too high, it can cause it can enter into the brain, and it can cause brain damage. And brain is one of those organs that don't recover. Once it's gone, it's gone. Okay. Once the brain is affected, it's affected, and that's it. And all we can do is to manage the consequence of that. So the best thing is to treat it, so that we don't have to deal with that. So now let's talk about the management of neonatal jaundice. How do we treat jaundice? Okay, so I've told us the type of jaundice, the physiological jaundice and the pathological jaundice. And the treatments actually follow the same pattern. If it is a physiological jaundice, we don't need to treat it. So there are jaundice that we don't treat. So if we take the blood sample and the SB is 7 and baby is A5, the SB is 7 or 5 or 9, we're not going to worry. We're just going to tell you, go home, and go and keep breastfeeding your baby, because we think that this is most likely physiological jaundice. But we also ask you to come back, because I've seen parents who say, they say, oh, it is low, then they go home. But people don't tell them to come back. And then mothers sometimes they feel that, okay, the doctor have said I should go home, everything is fine. For jaundice, everything is fine as at the time we saw you. We have to check it again because it may rise. And jaundice will normally rise first before it starts to come down, because I see a lot of parents asking us that question, that when they took the jaundice on day one, it was 4, and then they took it on day 3, day 6, it is now 10. Why? No, jaundice always rise first. Okay, so you just relax. It has to rise first before it will come down. So we're not worried about it rising. What we are worried about is that, is it rising too fast, or it is rising above what we call the normal cutoff for physiological jaundice. And I've told you the normal cutoff is 12. Okay, on day, like day 5. So if the jaundice is not rising above our normal cutoff, we have some way of checking all that. I won't bore you with all that. But we have a way of knowing that this jaundice is following the physiological jaundice pattern. So we will tell you, we're not going to treat it. We don't need to do anything. Just breastfeed your baby, and that is all. You need to breastfeed babies, because there are also other causes of jaundice I didn't talk about. There's what we call breastfeeding jaundice or starvation jaundice, because if you don't breastfeed and the baby do not pass out what we call the meconium, the initial stools, that stool itself can generate that can cause jaundice. Okay, so we call that breastfeeding jaundice. But we actually have what we call breast milk jaundice itself, which is due to some substances in breast milk causing jaundice to be high. But I won't. But there's a way we figure it out. Don't worry about that. So when we take the first level of jaundice, if it's not so high, we need to check it again. We must check it again every 48 hours until we have seen that it is coming down. So until the level of the jaundice is now below the level that it was highest, you cannot stop, because we never know. So we usually always like to check at least 2-3 times before we can tell you no reason to worry anymore. And if it is physiological jaundice, we don't need to do anything, and that's it. But if it's pathological jaundice is very high, or it is rising rapidly, or jaundice occurring in the first day of life, it is pathological jaundice, and we have to treat it. So the treatment we usually give for pathological jaundice, phototherapy. So phototherapy, we have the different kind. We have the blue light, we have the one we give on top, we have the one that we wrap the baby into, the brilly blankets and all that. But we must give phototherapy. They all work on the principle that light, some wavelengths of that light, they can convert that bilirubin from the what we call the type that can harm the baby's brain, the unconjugated type. They can convert it to the conjugated type that doesn't cause any harm to the baby and will be passed safely out in stools. So that is what the phototherapy is doing. So it's a one way we treat jaundice. So if the jaundice is, so there's a level for starting phototherapy, there's a level to continue phototherapy, but there's a level of jaundice that we have to do what we call exchange blood transfusion, which is the third method of treatment. We have to exchange the blood. So we have to take away, because if the jaundice is so high and we are worried that it's going to enter into the brain and cause the damage, which is all that the doctor is trying to do. All that we're trying to do in jaundice is not that the jaundice should come down. It's just that the jaundice will not cause brain damage, which will lead to cerebral palsy, hearing loss, and all the other consequences. So when parents say, oh, the jaundice is going to come down, the jaundice has come down, it is not the jaundice coming down. Whether we do anything or not, whether we fold our hands or not, jaundice will always come down. So I always like parents to understand that the goal is not jaundice coming down. The goal is that before jaundice comes down by itself, it has not caused a brain damage, because you can never reverse the brain damage that has happened due to the severe jaundice. So we need to understand that it's time is of essence in jaundice. So it is so important for us to get that right. So when we are acting like when we are acting and rushing, it's because we are being careful. We don't want the brain to be affected. So there's a level of jaundice that we need to take out the blood. We do what we call exchange blood transfusion. We try not to do that because blood transfusion has its own complications and all that. So, but we try to do as much of phototherapy. We do what we call intensive phototherapy. But some babies have so severe jaundice, it's so bad. We just have to do exchange blood transfusion. And some kind of jaundice, like if it's infection, we may need to treat it with antibiotics. Please, ampiclox is not the treatment for jaundice. I hear it a lot in Nigeria. People will say, "Oh, my baby has jaundice. Doctor has prescribed ampiclox for me." And what else they prescribe? Yes, ampiclox and Abidec. Yes, and they say I should go home. No XB was taken. Nothing. Just go and give ampiclox. This is the reason why most babies with jaundice end up with brain damage. And most of the parents will also go home, we're giving ampiclox, we're already treating the jaundice, or we're giving pawpaw water, we're already treating the jaundice. Then they will not come to the hospital until after naming ceremony. And then by then, the baby is no longer sucking, the baby is having convulsion, the baby is riding bicycle. It means that the brain has been damaged. The baby already have what we call kernicterus or bilirubin encephalopathy. In simple English, brain damage due to jaundice. There's nothing doctors going to do at that time. Whether we exchange the blood or we don't exchange the blood, the deed has been done. Okay, so I'm saying this because I know a lot of you are listening to me, and this some of you know what I'm talking about because this happen a lot of the time. So if your baby has jaundice, if your doctor did not ask you to do a blood test to know the level of jaundice, take your baby away from that hospital. Go to a hospital with a pediatrician. If your doctor is only writing ampiclox for you when your baby has jaundice, throw away the ampiclox. Go to a hospital that's a pediatrician. And I'm saying that with all sense of responsibility because I am a developmental pediatrician. I say that a lot of the time, but I see all these babies. That's my job, to see babies who have all these developmental disorders. And it's very painful for you knowing that this condition that this baby is dealing with is completely preventable. Okay, brain damage, cerebral palsy, hearing loss due to jaundice is completely preventable if we pick up the jaundice on time and if we manage it on time. And so that is important. So jaundice can be treated, jaundice can be managed, but time is of essence. Okay, so if you have any of those, so let's, as I round up, let's just quickly talk about prevention of jaundice. There are some jaundice that we cannot prevent. Okay, some babies are just going to have jaundice anyway. If you are O blood group, if you are rhesus negative blood group, prepare your mind that your babies may have jaundice. So if you are rhesus negative, and always check that your baby's blood group, when anytime you lose pregnancy, you have miscarriage, or you have a baby, it doesn't really matter which of them happens, you maybe have been sensitized. So they need to do a Rogam. You must get that Rogam. If not, your baby's at risk of rhesus hemolytic jaundice in future. So you must take Rogan. That's one way to prevent jaundice. 2, we must look out for jaundice on time. So the most important thing is to pick up jaundice on time because some jaundice is going to happen anyway, even no matter what we do. We can't do much in terms of prevention before the baby is born. But when baby is born, we need to check for jaundice. And new moms especially, you don't tend to know how to pick up jaundice. So that is why it's so important that every baby is examined by the doctor. And when you go home early, in places where they have health visitors and all that, nurses go to the house to check the babies. But we don't have that in some parts of the world, like in Nigeria. So it's so important for you to also be mindful. That's why some of us don't like discharging your babies until after 72 hours, because most jaundice that will cause serious problem would have started in the first 3 days of life. So if you likely if your baby did not have jaundice in the first 3 days of life, it's very unlikely your baby is going to have jaundice. And even if your baby has jaundice, it's very unlikely to be a severe kind of jaundice. So that's why some of us keep babies for 72 hours. But we also know that a hospital bed and all that, so it's fine. But please watch out for jaundice, watch out for it. And if your baby has jaundice, please take to a pediatrician. Okay, it is not every doctor that can manage jaundice. Okay, it is not every doctor that can manage jaundice. Pediatricians are the one that will manage jaundice. So please don't go to hospital where they don't take blood sample, where they only give you ampiclos and tell you to go home. That is not the treatment for jaundice. Pawpaw water is not treatment for jaundice. I don't know what else people give, but all those things, glucose water is not treatment for jaundice. Treatment for jaundice is either we're putting baby on that, it's either there's no treatment, in which case that means the jaundice is physiological jaundice, or we're putting the baby under phototherapy lights, or we're exchanging the blood. Every other treatment, like giving antibiotics, is only if your baby has infection, we give antibiotics. If it doesn't have infection, we don't need to give any antibiotics. So it is not like that. Some babies even need operation for jaundice. So like if this, like I talk about biliary atresia and all that. So those, thank God, those are not so common, but that is why a pediatrician needs to see a baby who has jaundice, make proper assessment, and treat the baby accordingly. Then, even when you get discharged home, please don't forget to go for follow up. So sometimes we tell you, come back in 48 hours. Some mothers say, oh, my baby is fine. Why do I need to go back? There's also what we call rebound jaundice. Jaundice can go down. We think we are winning. Then we send you home. And it just goes up through the roof again. And sometimes we have to readmit babies. So we try to avoid that, but sometimes it's unavoidable. And we just have to do the needful. So please always go back for checkup. Usually, most times when they discharge your people within the next 48 hours, you need to go back to the hospital. They need to check the jaundice level again. If it is still low, we are all happy. And sometimes we may even want to check one more time. But if it is too high, we may sometimes need to readmit the baby. So, but the most important thing is that please just make sure you go back for follow up. So, thank you so much for listening. I hope I've addressed the important things you need to know about jaundice. We've talked about the type of jaundice, the physiological jaundice, the pathological jaundice. We've talked about the common causes of jaundice. And of course, it is not your responsibility as a parent to treat the jaundice. That is the job of the pediatrician, but you need to take your baby to the pediatricians. Remember that jaundice is so important because it's about the brain. The complications of jaundice can cause brain damage, cerebral palsy. Child could have intellectual disability. They struggle through school. Some of them will have all these abnormal movements. They have abnormal movements. They have convulsions. Some of them have hearing loss. They can't hear. So these are things that are largely preventable if we pick up jaundice on time, take the baby to the hospital on time, and let the pediatricians do their job. So thank you so much for listening. And please pass this information along. A lot of our children in Nigeria are still having complications due to poor management of jaundice. Let's pass this information along, and I'm sure that you'll be saving the life of a baby. If you have any question, feel free to send me an email at Dr. Gwemisola at askthepediatricians.com. You can also post your questions on our Facebook group from Mondays to Saturday. Every day, 24 hours, we answer questions about every health issues. You're welcome to join our Facebook groups as well. We have the Ask the Pediatricians for the children, ATP Family for the adult, ATP Still a Mom for those who have suffered the loss of children. So feel free to post your questions on our group. Please follow us on all our social media platforms. We are on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we are on YouTube. If you want to watch all these videos, please head over to our YouTube channel, ATP TV, and you can also listen to all these broadcasts on my podcast, Ask Dr. Gbemi ATP. And if you want to support us, please donate towards our outreaches on our account. Details are showing on your screen. Ask the Pediatricians Foundation 0258-158-136 GT Bank, or you can head over to our website www.askthepediatricians.com and make your donations there. So till I see you again next week, when I'll be talking about another important topic that has to do with the health of our children. Stay blessed and keep on keeping our children healthy. Bye.